welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frater Eleftheria, and, well, the email list continues to grow. If you haven't heard about my email list already, I have started an email list to get a bit more independence from YouTube and from the Google algorithm. The people who run YouTube and Google seem to love Satan, and I'm in the business of trying to illuminate people's souls. So obviously that puts me at a bit of a difference with them in terms of my content being promoted on here. So please join my mailing list. It is continuing to grow, so I know that there's people who are still hearing about it now. So if that's you, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can sign up to that and find out about all the great things I'm doing in the future. In particular, the publishing of my upcoming book, The Voces Caelesti. We're getting closer to the publication date for that, and all of the preparations are going along swimmingly. So it's coming very soon, and you will be updated on it, on its release, by joining the mailing list. But tonight I wanted to continue going into some of the subject matters that are covered in that book. I've spoke about a more esoteric concept of the Christ, and in this video I'm going to touch on the same topic but in a different area. And what I'm really doing is pulling together a few threads from other videos and other topics that I've explored on this channel over the years. And so I'm going to be talking once again about the more esoteric meaning of the symbol of the Christ. But specifically what I'm going to be doing this week is drawing some similarities between the inner Christ as defined by certain forms of esoteric Christianity and Christian mysticism, most notably Gnosticism on the one hand, and then the holy guardian angel on the other, as found in Western ceremonial magic, particularly in Thelema. To some extent the Golden Dawn, although they don't always refer to it as the holy guardian angel. But you've got these two concepts, and I want to demonstrate tonight that they're actually very related and could in fact be pointing to the same spiritual experience. So before we explore this topic some more, let's just define terms first. What is the holy guardian angel? It can be seen as either a separate being to us, an external kind of guardian spirit that watches over us, or it can be considered a part of us, the higher self. And as well as being considered the higher self within us, it's also considered to be the one and the same with the inner divine core of our being. And so there's a few different ideas that get labelled as the holy guardian angel there, which are not necessarily unrelated to one another. Another way that the holy guardian angel gets described is as a hieros gamos by J. Daniel Gunther. Gunther, I wasn't a fan of him as a person, but sometimes he occasionally made good points. And he describes the holy guardian angel as a union between two different beings. The human, which is the person who is the aspirant or the spiritual seeker, and then the divine. And the union of those two forms the holy guardian angel. But there seems to be this emphasis on some part of the divine that exists inside of us as the core of our being, and which, if it is not already a part of us, comes to be integrated into us through this process, which is known as the knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel, usually in the form of a months-long ritual to attain such knowledge and conversation. And this is a big feature of the Western esoteric tradition. I've done a whole playlist on this topic, which I'll link in the description below if you want more information on that. Well, you know what Christ is from a Sunday school point of view, but what are we talking about when we talk about the esoteric view of the Christ? Leaving aside the idea of a grand cosmic principle that creates and animates the universe, otherwise known as the Logos, leaving that aside for a moment, we can principally consider the Christ to be, again, something that is within us. It is a tendency, if you will, that exists within each person. And the idea is that Christ was not uniquely an incarnation of God, that he merely embodied this principle fully, and we too can embody that same principle that exists within each of us. And that principle is what the Christ truly is. Again, something more connected to the divine than the other parts of us, something that is contained within us. But already we can see there's some big similarities between the holy guardian angel on the one hand, otherwise known as the higher divine genius, and the inner Christ on the other. So let's explore that further and try and unpack that further and see exactly what the connection is, if any. So the place that we need to start in our exploration is by looking at an idea from Kabbalah that is related to the parts of the soul. And it's talking about the highest part of the human soul, which is known as the Yehidah. The Yehidah, if you've seen my video on the Second Coming, corresponds to the spark of the Messiah within each of us, according to Jewish mysticism. There's already this connotation with what in Christian mysticism would be termed the inner Christ. But the Yehidah also has connotations with the idea in Western ceremonial magic of the holy guardian angel. And actually, I did quite a bit of research on this when I was a member of the AA, or Argentium Astrum. During my student examination, I was asked a certain question. I'm not supposed to divulge what the questions are, but I answered by giving a detailed account of what the Yehidah represents. And so I quoted extensively from some of Crowley's writings. I'm not a fan of him as a person, but he did make an exemplary contribution to Western occultism. And Crowley talks about how the Yehidah is in fact one and the same with the Holy Guardian Angel. In the Equinox Volume 1, Number 4, page 145, as well as the Equinox Volume 1, Number 1, page 159. In addition to that, the Yehidah is analogous with the Hindu idea of Atman, the innermost divine spark in our being. In Sefer Sephiroth, at number 37, this connection is made. And of course, Atman, elsewhere in Crowley's writings, is described as one and the same with the Holy Guardian Angel. It's the very same part of us that we're trying to contact when we're trying to contact Atman, as well as when we're trying to contact the Holy Guardian Angel. And actually, there's a whole lot of similarities between the system of the parts of the soul that exists in Kabbalah and the 5 sheaths within yoga. I did a whole video on this, which I'll also link in the description below. So already we're starting to see a lot of concordance between the idea of the Atman, the Yehidah, the innermost divine nature within us, and the Holy Guardian Angel and the spark of the Messiah within each of us. But the Holy Guardian Angel is described as more than just the inner Atman of each person. It's also referred to often as the higher self. So where exactly did this term higher self originate from? It seems like a bit of a wishy-washy word that just gets thrown around in a lot of New Age circles today without any real depths of understanding of what that is. But this is a word that does have an origin, and its origin is in Theosophy in the 19th century, as is much of the content of the New Age movement of today. Within Theosophy, the higher self is specifically the Atman combined with the Buddhi, which is kind of like the perfect vehicle of Atman that allows it to express itself, principally in the form of unconditional love. Those two things together, those two parts of us together, form the higher self. And the 7 bodies of Theosophy are also closely related to the 5 sheaths of yoga. And when this higher self of Atman and Buddhi connects itself to the higher mind or higher manas, then this is the way that it expresses itself in the world. And this combination of the higher self with the higher manas is what represents the Christ in each individual person according to the Theosophical view. See, for example, the Key to Theosophy, pages 67 to 68. So now things get a little bit more overcomplicated because you've got not only the divine spark within each person, but the vehicle through which that has to be expressed through the kind of higher parts of our being, which can be described as the higher self, which means these higher parts of us working together, but it's also the Christ, which is these three parts of us working together, but the inner Christ, in terms of the spark of the Messiah, just means Yekida in Jewish mysticism. So it all starts getting a bit confusing and convoluted. And I think some of that comes down to Theosophy overly intellectualizing things and complicating things and splitting hairs about esoteric concepts to make new esoteric concepts, and just taking things too far in that direction and just confusing everybody. So to kind of cut against some of that, let's just simplify it a bit. The main point being illustrated here is that we have an inner divine nature that is our true nature, which we're trying to contact and then ultimately express once we have integrated that into our being, or understanding or discovering or remembering that that's what we truly are, to be more exact. And then that divine nature needs an appropriate vehicle. The lower mind, the emotions, the monkey mind, the body won't suffice. We need to activate these higher parts of us. And so ultimately, part of the process of integrating this divine part of us is by awakening those higher parts of our nature as well, to give expression to that divine nature. And this is really what is being pointed towards, both in terms of union with the Holy Guardian Angel and actually the work of an Adeptus after union with the Holy Guardian Angel, but also with the union with the inner Christ. It's really the same process that's being described here, but with slightly different language. Another thing to consider is that the Christ and the Holy Guardian Angel both have very strong Tiphereth associations. If you know your tree of life and you know your correspondences and the different archetypal energies at different points of the tree, Tiphereth is at the center of the tree. Tiphereth represents the sun. It represents individual consciousness. And at this part of the tree in Western esotericism, the Holy Guardian Angel is approached. And this is also where the mysteries of death and resurrection are enacted in initiations. For example, the Vault of the Adepti in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And of course, Christ is a symbol that is indelibly associated with death and resurrection. And of course, the Christ also represents that point of consciousness within us, as I've just demonstrated, and also represents the sun. The Christ figure that has come down to us today borrows very heavily from other pagan sun gods in terms of his own symbolism, because he is a solar god, and the Christ nature within has a solar attribution, and it's within Tiphereth that we discover that we first unite with that principle. So again, what we see is multiple paths all pointing towards the same goal but using slightly different language. And this helps us to see the Holy Guardian Angel in a different light, as most of what we have on the Holy Guardian Angel right now comes down to us from Thelema and therefore from Crowley. Crowley was very deliberately anti-Christian in the symbols that he incorporated into his belief system. Even the ritual to attain knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, his own ritual that he created for this, Liber Samic, which borrowed heavily from the bornless rite or the headless rite of the Greek magical papyri, reinterpreted or retranslated in a completely anachronistic way the barbarous words in Greek that accompany that invocation, interpreting certain barbarous phrases as saying things like, "O Satan, O Son." So turning something which is holy into something very satanic. And that's taking us in precisely the opposite direction for understanding what the Holy Guardian Angel ritual is supposed to accomplish. In fact, and this is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but those who are seeking the Holy Guardian Angel, those who are seeking after the higher divine genius, have in fact been seeking after the Christ all along. The spiritual principle that is behind the Holy Guardian Angel and the spiritual principle that is behind the idea of the inner Christ, the mystical Christ, are one and the same principle. But I think that it is important to acknowledge this fact. And you know, Christian mysticism has been a feature of the Western esoteric tradition for hundreds of years, much longer than Thelema has been a feature of it. So we need to just get a bit realistic about what the real underlying religious and spiritual symbolism of certain things in Western ceremonial magic might actually be pointing us towards. And understanding the linkages that I've described tonight also helps us to harmonize some of the different approaches to initiation that we have within the Western esoteric tradition, because there is a lot of variation. You've got stuff like Hermeticism, and then you've got stuff like Thelema, and then you've got stuff that is more overtly Christian or Jewish or something like that. And we can start to see how all of the symbols are pointing towards something more universal. And syncretism doesn't always work, but in this instance, I think that we can discover an important underlying truth, which will help us in our divine self-actualization ultimately. So, I hope you enjoyed that video. Now, before I conclude this video, I just want to give a plug to an interview that I did on another podcast recently. I appeared on the Arcanvm podcast of Ike Baker. It was a very good interview, and by the time I posted this video, that interview will have been put up on Arcanvm, so I'll leave a link to that down below. I encourage you to check that out. And again, if you haven't joined my mailing list already, I encourage you to do so. Perhaps this video has convinced you to do so. But if you want to support me some other way, leave a like, subscribe to my channel to support my work, hit join or thanks to support me further. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.